Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for this week's Snack and Chat, Adopt for Life's weekly Facebook Live, where we explore the topics that are top of mind for families formed by adoption, kinship, and customary care. My name is Chantal, Community Engagement Liaison with Adopt for Life. Today, our guest is Dianne Mathes, the Executive Director of the ACO, which I'm sure you know, but an organization which provides information, education, and training for members of the adoption permanency galaxy and professionals. Dianne has over 35 years of experience providing therapy and education training for individuals, couples, children, and families and professionals. In her private practice, she specialized in adoption and provided therapy and training on the experiences and realities of early separation, adoption, abandonment, trauma, abuse, loss, and grief, as well as the multi-layered experience of being adopted and being a family in permanency. Dianne is herself an adoptee and has experienced her own personal journey in adoption and reunion. Dianne has a certificate of social work degree from Ryerson University and is a member of the OCSSWSW, which you'll have to tell me what that is, because I was supposed to look it up, but I forgot. So thanks, Dianne, for being here. I hope you'll join me in welcoming Dianne. We're going to talk about openness and open-heartedness and learn about that. Whether you're watching live or maybe you're watching this later on replay, thank you for taking time to be with us. Feel free to ask your questions or just put in your comments in the chat. We love to hear from you. I'll just take a moment to remind you that since we're live streaming on our public page, whatever you put in the comments is information that's publicly available. So we ask you to be mindful and not include any identifiable information, names, health information, things like this, if you're asking a question about your families. So just keep that in mind and put your questions or comments in the chat. And we hope you find this discussion informative and engaging. So there's my long spiel. Thanks again, Dianne. Welcome. How are you today?
I'm great. Lovely to be here with you.
Thank you. Lovely to be here with you as well. So I think we're going to jump right in to our discussion today, and maybe just start before we jump into the questions is just sort of describing that concept of open-heartedness for those that may be new to that term.
Yeah. Well, and I think ultimately everybody decides for themselves what open-heartedness means. It's a state of being, right? If we're open-hearted in the world, it literally means that our hearts are engaged, our hearts are involved. We are receptive, we are loving, we are giving, we are kind, and really we're not in fear. There's many people that in the world now would say, you know, you're either in love or you're in fear. And if you're open-hearted, it's much harder to be in fear. So it's the place we want to get to not just be thinking our way through situations. Not that we don't need our minds, they're really important, obviously, but in certainly something as complex and important as adoption and permanency, we want to have an integration between our minds and our hearts.
That's great, thank you. So let's jump in. So in November, Adopt for Life hosted a panel during November, which was, as you know, Adoption Awareness Month. You had many of your own educational programs. We went and had a theme called Language Matters. So we really explored language and its relation within adoption and permanency. Yeah. So during this panel, one of the words that we discussed was openness. And there was a comment that really, I mean, there were so many such great discussion around that, but there was one in particular that stayed with me, which was openness is a bridge for children, a bridge to their past, to their present, and their future. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the word openness, but also how that works in relation to open-heartedness.
Okay. Well, openness, as I think people hear about it in adoption and permanency, tends to get connected to contact specifically with original families. And yet actually openness is about much more than that. And open-heartedness can or cannot exist within openness. So, I mean, to back up just a little bit, I mean, I think what we know now is that children, youth, and adults on permanency journeys really need to know their stories. So if you look to the writings of many psychotherapists, to Dan Hughes, who's done so much of the attachment work down in the States, you know, Dan's statement is that, you know, we must give children their stories, and they must be able to make meaning out of those stories if they're going to have successful lives, have identity, have a good sense of self. I mean, those, we know, those are the prerequisites to children being healthy and solid and confident and happy in the world. So if we don't have openness, children don't know that. We're then talking about a closed adoption. And in rare situations, sometimes that's really important because of safety issues. But I think what open-heartedness brings into the conversation, and Laurie Holden actually introduced some of this in an open-heartedness grid that she put out a number of years ago, is that contact and openness is not open-heartedness. So we can have families that don't see each other. There isn't actual, you know, in-person meetings between the original family and the adopted family, but there's open-heartedness. There's an openness on the part of the kin parents, customary care parents, adoptive parents, to the importance of that original family in their life, and particularly in their children's life. And what we train, what the Pathways program is based on, and what we train professionals is that if children get no information, or a sense that they can't have information, or that there's something wrong with their parents, their original parents, they internalize that experience. They take that into their sense of who they are and their sense of themselves. And not only are they not able to do the work that they need to do in the world to know who they are and to feel good about themselves, but they actually will kind of layer on that some negative stuff. And what I think Laurie's work has helped us with is understanding that if there's open-heartedness, if there's an open sense of the importance of respect, a caring about the original family, and inclusion, whether it's actually in person with contact, or it's open-heartedness. It's an open-heartedness. It's not a fear of those people or what they represent or who they are. It makes all the difference in the world to children, youth, and adults on permanency journeys. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I'm just thinking back to my own experience, because, you know, from a certain generation, all my adoptions were closed, and that's just how things were. There was just no other way at the time. And there weren't all these sort of associations and trainings for parents to sort of explore all these different, you know, parenting styles. And although it wasn't a secret in my house, but my parents were just like, well, we don't know, you know, this is the limit of our knowledge. And then you're just kind of like, okay. But now, you know, knowing more and completely having different situations, I think it's still important to have that, like you mentioned, just because there's contact doesn't mean there's open-heartedness, and vice versa. So
yeah. And sometimes there's physical contact based in fear. And of course, that creates all kinds of tensions and issues and complications for both the child or youth as well as the adoptive parents, because anytime we're living from a place of fear, we're not going to have positive outcomes. We're going to have tension, we're going to have stress, we're going to have conflicts, things are going to escalate, things are going to be, and then kids get very confused about, you know, who are they in all of this and what's important and how do they talk about it. And as one 7-year-old said to me years and years ago, I have big feelings about all of this, Dianne. But big feelings don't mean that I shouldn't be seeing my dad. It just means that I have big feelings. And I think it's such a, kids are so wonderful, right? In terms of telling us what those simple, important things are, that there are big feelings, right? Kids who grow up in permanency didn't get to stay with their original families. And without some sense of who their original families are and the importance of them, like in your story, you don't have that information to base in. And that, I'm an adult adoptee, that was very much my history. But when I went back and searched, and I think this is what we don't want, is when I went back and searched in my 30s, and I learned all this, not only history, but culture that I came from, that I'd had no access. It's like having to relearn a sense of identity and who you are and where you come from and how you see the world and experience the world. Because it's like, well, it isn't like, it is that this huge part of who you are has been missing for so long. And so that becomes really, really important. And so if we can give that to kids as part of their growing up and their life, they're not in their 30s in the middle of careers and life and parents and relationships trying to figure that stuff out.
For sure, for sure. The earlier the better, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I wonder if we could go back and really kind of, when you said contact with coming from a place of fear, can we like, so you're meaning like the parents are afraid of contact, or they're going into this because it has to be done and they're not going in with just,
All of the above, I think,
okay,
can be factors, Chantal, right?
okay,
If there's an openness order,
okay,
parents may or may not feel that's important. I've had many adoptive parents over the years say to me, I just assumed once I got into the adoption that I could do what I wanted to do because I didn't agree. I didn't feel like my child or youth was safe seeing them. I didn't understand why this was important. And then we started having the visits. And she was really upset afterwards and she was having a hard time. And it took a week to settle her down. And then I was like, this is really not a good idea. She said, but I guess in this situation, this was an older child who was 10 or 11. And she was able to say to her mom, sort of what I was talking about, just because it hurts doesn't mean I don't want to see her. Just because it's hard doesn't mean I don't want to see my birth mom. And so that really helped her adoptive mom come around to realizing that, oh, it goes back to she needs this. And I mean, that's the heart really of adoption and permanency is that, and I don't need to tell you this, right? You're living kind of a duality, right? You do have kind of two lives, two worlds, two everything. And if, one part of that is missing, it can become really confusing for kids and youth to figure out what can I talk about? What can I not talk about? What's okay to say? What's not okay to say? And if adoptive parents are fearful, then kids are going to pick that up. They might not understand what it is, but they're going to know there's something here that is not quite okay. And it doesn't mean that adoptive parents don't have the right to be fearful, to be scared. Certainly if there's been trauma or abuse in the past, or there's safety issues or safety concerns. But again, that comes back to you can have low contact and high open-heartedness to the importance. I mean, ultimately, you, me, anybody walking an adoption journey has to figure out where they came from, however difficult or hard that truth or experience or reality is. Now, we're obviously going to do that at age-appropriate ways and age-appropriate stages. But many times what parents are afraid of is loss, right? We come back to that core experience, right? They're afraid that if they open to this other family, they're going to lose their child. They're not it's that, am I the rightful parent? Am I the legitimate parent? Well, they're the original, all those fears float around in the middle of all of that and get in the way of people being open-hearted to the concept that really there are two families. But it's a family who brought the child into the world, holds the history, holds keys to identity, and it's the family who is raising the child and providing the security, right? And it can't be an either or.
Yeah. And I think for the children too, like whether, if you don't have that, it's just an innate, you're gonna want to know where you came from. So whether you foster that relationship earlier or you wait till they're older, they're gonna go do it on their own. So why not be a part of it and make it,
Exactly.
yeah. It's
And we
interesting that,
know,
yeah.
sorry,
Go ahead.
sorry. No, I was just going to say, I mean, we know we have kids as young as 11 years old going on the internet and searching for their original parents. And so it isn't, is this going to happen? It's how do you want this to happen? Do you want this to happen with your fears and uncertainties being taken care of and your relationship with your child growing as a result of it? Or do you want this something that they're hiding in their rooms on their computers looking for these people and engaging sometimes in these connections that then may not be a safe or healthy way to do it?
Yeah, and you want them to have that support network around them when they're going through that too. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so why not? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, one of the saddest things as a therapist that I would see is that a lot of these issues would come to light at the point that a teen either had already looked for a birth parent or was wanting to look for a birth parent, or even a young adult found an original family member. And all these unresolved issues of fear and uncertainty and loss, and am I going to be rejected? So then I'd have parents in my office saying, so I've really just been the babysitter for the last 20 years, or so I'm really not important, right? And that's so hard at that point for everybody because it's absolutely not the truth. And yet, when a child or a youth hasn't had that contact, they do get a little obsessive about that family for a while as they're trying to figure out who they are and those relationships and all those connections. But it doesn't mean that the adoptive, I mean, we know in situations that are done well, that are done with openness, open-heartedness, no secrecy, the relationships between children and youth and their adoptive families strengthen. They absolutely get better. So it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
And we can't plunk openness onto people without helping them find their way to open-heartedness. And I so often tell people, I don't know whether you've heard me tell this story, but I often tell people the story of I introduced my birth mom and my adoptive mom. They were both women in their 70s. It was 30 years ago. I was pretty convinced that two women in their 70s could manage to have tea together and this wouldn't be a complete or total disaster. And they got together. And they were very polite and they were very warm and they were fine. And I got called away from the meeting for something to do with a client. And of course, I raced upstairs, got the client off the phone as fast as I could and came racing back down thinking there's no way this is going to happen properly if I'm not in the room. And I came down the stairs and there was these two women in their 70s sitting at my dining room table with cups of tea in front of them, holding hands and crying together. And what were they doing? They were talking about their experiences in that first year of my life. And I thought, oh my gosh, they don't need me. And both of them clearly needed to talk through what that was like for them together, not with me, you know? And I thought, oh my gosh, what a missed opportunity that this didn't happen 35 years ago for me in terms of knowing who she was and her life. But also the funny thing was they became best friends. They became really close. They were very similar women, right? It was just fascinating. And it was such a teaching moment for me that all those images, all those old messaging about adoption that we get is often not really, it's not helpful, but it's also not really always quite accurate about, you know, who the people are. You know, yes, original families may have addiction histories or trauma in their lives, but they also have something to offer. And, you know, I also tell people the story of the woman in downtown Toronto who was a pregnancy worker on Yonge Street, and she kept pictures of all the young women who got pregnant on Yonge Street and had babies. And she took a picture of them in the hospital and put the pictures on the wall because in her office, because she said, I've learned that they love their babies. They just can't take care of them. So these women could come back in at the points that they were, a little more functional or a little more able, and they could see their babies. And they could have a little bit of that connection. So it's all in terms of how, and that's open-heartedness, right? Those are living examples of what open-heartedness means and looks like, right?
Well, those are beautiful stories, and thank you for sharing yours. I hadn't heard it, so thanks.
Okay.
Nice imagery there too. And I just wanted to bring back that first example you brought up about sort of the openness orders and the visits and the parent bringing, and then there's dysregulation with the child. So in our private communities, there's this sort of discussion comes up a lot. And what's great about the community is that, they have other people saying, well, what should I do? And more often than not, the parents come back and say, more visits, more contact.
Yeah.
And some
cases, because more visits, more contact means this becomes a part of life. And even though the loss and the sadness will be there, you figure out how to feel a little more solid and secure within those relationships. I think it's when people assume or get fearful, we don't want to deal with this isn't good for my child or my youth, that we go down more difficult paths and we get more escalating difficult feelings and situations to deal with.
Sure. Okay, that was question number 1.
Okay, we need to move a little faster, do we?
No. I think it's so great. If anybody's just tuning in now, we're talking live with Dianne Mathes from the ACO, and we're talking about openness and open-heartedness. So if you have any questions or anything you want to add to this discussion, feel free to put it in the chat. For those of us who have heard you speak before, you sometimes talk about the adoption galaxy. I wonder if you could explain a bit more about that and how that relates to openness and open-heartedness.
Yeah, I think we've expanded the concept to a galaxy. Simply, the more we talk to people on the permanency journey, original families, adoptive parents, we're just hearing more and more. It affects my partner, it affects my parents. Adoptive parents are saying, we often don't get the kind of support that we need from our friends or our communities because they don't really understand why we can't do traditional parenting or why we need to have this more therapeutic, open-hearted approach in this. And so I think, and I'm sure you see this at Adopt for Life all the time, the more you're talking about people who are living this journey, the more you realize it's just like these circles that just keep going. It's like throwing a rock in the lake, right? And so we really are talking about a galaxy of people who are affected, not just a constellation or a triad. And I think it's part of our evolution in this field of recognizing how the lifelong journey of adoption affects so many people in so many different ways.
Yeah, I like that. So our next question. So relationships within this adoption galaxy can obviously be very complex and sometimes messy. How can we develop and maintain open, healthy communication between adoptive parents and the first families or families of origin, or what term we're more comfortable using, in between parent and child, between the children and their community? So I know there's a lot of questions there, but I mean, the heart of it is just that, how do we practice that open, healthy communication?
Yeah. I mean, I think the reality is, it's funny how we talk about adoption, permanency relationships are messy, complicated, and they are. But I think in the world, relationships are complicated, right? Yeah. So I also like to be clear that, yeah, we're dealing, I always said to parents when I was a therapist, there's life and then there's adoption, right? And adoption is a lifelong journey, but everything isn't about it. And we have to learn how to navigate good, healthy, open, communicative, transparent relationships. we need to talk about the hard stuff. We need to have ways to look at what we're feeling. And you and I were talking about it before we came on today. You know, sometimes working in adoption as adult adoptees kind of raises stuff for us, right?
Yeah.
Because the 7 core issues are there for a reason, right? We are all living from an experience of loss and whatever that means. And then we're living all the rejection and identity and confusion and everything that goes with that. And I think historically, we've looked at adoption more as an event. So it happens if the child comes home and you do a certain number of things in the first year or so and you get the child attached, you will move on. It's like there's some goal point where you move past, or you, right? Where that's not the truth of adoption. If we really know that adoption is a lifelong journey, then we know that it's not an event where we promote attachment and then we move to something different. We are going to move in and out of relationships that have those core issues at the heart of them. And that's not just going to be true for the child, the youth, or the adult. That's going to be true for the original families. It's going to be true for all permanency parents. And I don't think we've done a good job in permanency of really providing ways for permanency parents to really look at how they are impacted by the 7 core issues of adoption. And to have a chance, I mean, this is where I think in preparation work, we could be doing such a better job of really helping parents look at, how do you know when you're triggered? How do you know when your fear comes up? How do you know when you move from a place of fear to out of open-heartedness and into fear? I mean, adoptive parents are so scrutinized and they have to go through so much to get into the process, which on one hand needs to happen. We need to make sure we're placing children with really healthy, secure families. At the same time, they're humans. And they're humans who, if we believe and know that they're experiencing all those core issues, deserve a way to know how to work with those issues. Because if parents are living in fear, feeling under pressure to be these perfect parents, it's going to make it much harder for them to attune to who their child or youth is and be open to what the needs and perspectives of that child and youth are. And I think that's where we've missed pieces. And, you know, we obviously try at ACO to advocate some of those pieces. You're trying to provide the peer support but I think we do have to get more systemic and really focused as a community on how do we really let adoptive parents know that doing that preparation work and understanding the impacts of the 7 core issues doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't mean you're going into therapy or you need counseling. It's the work all of us on these adoption journeys need to have as a way to not get stuck in fear, to not lose the relationships as a result of it.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect segue into our next question. So what are some of the reminders for adoptive parents or caregivers when they experience feelings of fear or anxiety about supporting openness? And also, going back to what you said, what do you wish that parents and caregivers do earlier on in the process, like you were saying?
So I just lost your audio on the very last part of that question, Chantel. Sorry.
So what do you wish, that part?
Yeah,
what do you wish that parents and caregivers understood earlier in the process?
I wish they understood that this has to be guided by their child or their youth.
Yes, simple, but I don't think there's more to it than that.
To look, hearing me okay?
Okay, sorry, you froze there for a second, but you're back now. So.
Oh, okay. So I think at the beginning, parents need to understand that this has to be a child-focused journey. And I think that's a very complicated concept. And it's a word and a phrase that we use a lot. but it really means understanding a child or a youth and what they need, even when they might not know the words. We are starting to do a lot of talking about, decoding, understanding what other things other than words might be communicating to us. And for parents to do that, one, they need support. They need to know how to do it. It's not some art form that floats out of the sky and just descends into your body of knowledge. And they have to be open to and have really looked at the hopes and the dreams and the expectations that they might have been holding for who this child is going to be. Because this child is going to be who this child needs to be, right? And they are going to represent some of their original family. And if you push them hard enough, or you don't tune into that, many children will try and meet the approvals, meet the kinds of expectations or hopes that they feel from their parents. But it's not necessarily creating all of who they could be. And then that's where, when they get to be teenagers or young adults, and we start seeing them look for original families so they can figure that stuff out, we often see the relationship fraying with the adoptive parents. And if adoptive parents could understand that if they can really follow who this little being is, whatever age they are, whatever life experience, they're going to be wonderful if they give themselves a chance to know who this little person really is, or big person, whatever the circumstances. But it might not be what's in their minds. It's like the biological family who decides that they want their boys to be hockey players, and the boys are like, no, we want to be in a band. I mean, that's a really simple example of it, but that's part of parenting, and it's a huge part of what has to be part of parenting and permanency.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think even whether you're parenting children who are adopted or not, I think as a parent you have
Absolutely.
this preconceived notion that, well, I'm raising them, they're going to have the same luck. Then you realize, oh no, they're their own person, and they're going to do what they want to do.
Yeah. And I think when you're a biological parent, there's some bonds, there's just a whole bunch of other things that kind of sometimes make that process of, oh, okay, she's not gonna do exactly the things, there's other things that help you make that transition, where I think sometimes there's not quite the security, not the support, not the understanding of what's really going on in all its complexity for permanency parents. And yet, if they can do that front end, if they can really look at their own core issues, how they might get triggered, what those vulnerabilities are, oh my gosh, the journey goes, it doesn't make it flawless, but they're equipped then to know when they get into those high conflict, high stress, difficult situations to go, this isn't what it looks like. This, I don't know what it is, but it's got something to do with the 7 core issues. I just have to get myself into a place of open-heartedness, get myself to a place where I can understand what this is about.
Right. So instead of just initially reacting to that fear or that anxiety, just taking a moment, right? Or two.
I had a brilliant 10-year-old I worked with for a number of years who said to me one day, so my parents keep explaining things to me. And do they not get that my explaining brain doesn't work very well when I'm upset? And I just thought, what, kids give it, right? And yet so many times parents are problem solving and explaining it, giving the reasons, providing and I think if you understand the lens of kids on permanency journeys, you understand that kind of goes in one ear and out the other, if it ever made it in the ear in the first place. And again, because I think so many children and youth are geared to what they feel and what they experience. And, I think Dan Hughes says it best when he says, connect if you want to correct, and don't open your mouth until you do. And again, some of these simple concepts, right? If you haven't made a connection, close it. And in trainings, Dan used to make us find ways to connect with parents and young people without opening our mouths as therapists. right? So there's just, and there can be accessible ways to learn all of this, right? It's just a different way of being in the world. But as an adoptee, being an adoptee is a different way of being in the world. So they got to get on the ship with us, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Love that. So speaking of adult adoptees, so over the past year or even a year and a half since I've been at Adopt for Life, I've had the privilege to speak with many adult adoptees. And because we're a certain age, we maybe didn't experience openness with their original families, but they have all at some point expressed how maybe having that relationship with their birth or first families would have had a tremendous impact on their life. So do you have any advice for awaiting adoptive families on how to prepare to support these relationships and supporting their children in these relationships?
Well, I mean, I think in many ways, Chantel, we're talking about it. It's that when parents are willing to really sit down and look at, what might my fears be? What am I most worried about? What is it about an original family I'm most concerned about? And get beyond well, my child might not be safe. Like, just, go a little deeper to what is it? Because it usually comes down to those fears of loss, those fears of rejection, those fears of not bonding, all of that sort of stuff. And if they can look at what they need, and particularly how they can support each other if it's a two-parent family in those times, because kids are lasers. Kids and youth with rejection and abandonment histories are lasers. They're going to figure out where their parent weaknesses are, and they're going to go zinc, zinc, zinc. And when you get parents into therapy eventually, and you ask them for the key areas where some of these issues are happening, and you start talking about vulnerabilities and challenges, you can almost list what they are. And parents are like, oh my gosh, of course that's why. Yes, that's a huge, right? But unfortunately, sometimes we're way down the road to some dangerous territory before they, we often don't get parents and families into therapy until things have gotten pretty serious. Where if parents have done that, what are my challenges? What's going to trigger me? Well, and how am I going to deal with that when it happens? How am I going to recognize it? How am I going to know I've shifted to fear? Am I going to take a break? Am I going to, there's a communication, there's an openness, there's a conversation. It makes all the difference in the world. Then we've got a family on the edge of some crisis or even a disruption before we're recognizing that. And then we're just managing, stuff that we got to get them past it to get them back to where if we'd just done that in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, anytime where you're just dealing with things when a crisis arises, of course, you're always going to be way, yeah.
And of course, by that point, if we've not given children and youth that attunement, we've often built up a lot of unrecognized shame that, there's something wrong with me. If these people are so horrible, I can't have contact with them, then what does that say about me? And, when people don't have information, don't have access to what they need to resolve things, we tend to make up things, right? And if they then are reading things or ferreting out material, we end up with kids who can feel pretty ashamed and pretty awful about themselves. And then, of course, that leads to a cycle of what they're going to start doing, behaviors they're going to start, because shame is so internalized and so deep in them. And they're not going to be able to sit down and rationally say to us, well, I'm feeling rather ashamed of myself these days, and that's not going to happen.
No.
Right. So then we're going to get a whole bunch of kinds of messaging and communication about what's going on that isn't really telling us. And I think words are complicated for kids and youth because so much of where this original loss and rejection and disorientation and confusion came from was often before they were pre-verbal. And they don't even have memory I know the times in my life, you may know the times in your life when you're like, something is really wrong, but I don't have something to attach it to up here. How do I communicate this? And sometimes big feelings and big emotional experiences at least get us to a point where we've got something we can kind of navigate with a little bit. And of course, that has to be safe. But I am beginning to wonder, after all the years I've been a therapist, if this focus on, we've got to get these kids regulated, we've got to get these, if really that's the route we should be going in a lot of these situations. Because I know for myself, that being able to be connected to my emotional life, my heart, my experience was my survival. Now I was, obviously it has to be safe, but sometimes it had some pretty big, impactful, and yet it was the basis on which I survived. And I come from a pretty horrendous traumatic background. So, I think there's a lot we need to be rethinking in terms of what's the experience and how do we respond to it.
Definitely. So just looking at the time, and I'm conscious of everybody's time, those who are watching and yours as well. So I'm just going to sort of just leave the last couple of minutes open. If there's any last message that you would like to share with the community, I'll leave it to you.
Well, I want to thank you. I mean, I love your interest, Chantal, in the whole concept of open-heartedness, because I think your interest, or even the openness to the conversation, takes us that level below trying to problem solve what openness is at just a thinking level. And so I think engaging in these kind of conversations, transparency, honesty, openness, lack of, is such a huge step in terms of moving us forward for what kids, youth, and adults, and ultimately their original and permanency families need. So just thank you for doing this. I think it's a great opportunity.
Well, thank you for being here. And if you're watching, I hope that this conversation has inspired you to have conversations about openness and open-heartedness with your families and friends. The more open we are talking about it, the easier it becomes. So
that's true. It is true. We can get good at hard conversations.
Practice.
It's true.
So if you're watching on replay, again, if you want to direct a question towards Dianne or any of us, you can put it in the chat. You can also just email us or send us a direct message through our Facebook page. Next week, Karen Smith and Allison Fair from Surrey Place are going to be joining us to talk about self-regulation. We just sort of touched on that a little bit at the end. So join us then, and I'm wishing everybody a very good week. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay warm, and wishing you all the best. Thanks again, Dianne. Bye for now.
Thank you, Chantal. Take care. Have a lovely day.